My fiancé said. I invited my ex to the wedding. If you loved me, you'd understand. I replied. I do understand. Then I quietly contacted his wife and invited her as +1. The rehearsal dinner became legendary when. Looking back now, I should have caught the red flags months earlier. But isn't that how it always goes when you're in love? You ignore the little things. Explain away the inconsistencies. Tell yourself you're overthinking it because admitting the truth means facing something you're not ready to face. I'm 32. Been with Jessica for 3 solid years. Engaged for 8 months. And we had this beautiful wedding planned for next month at this gorgeous venue by the river. 150 people invited. Deposits paid. The whole fairy tale setup that's supposed to be the happiest moment of your life. Last Thursday we were having dinner at home. Just a regular weeknight. Pasta and wine. Talking about the final guest confirmations when she dropped it on me so casually I almost didn't register what she'd said at first. She goes, "Oh, so I invited Trevor to the wedding." And I literally stopped mid-chew because Trevor isn't just some random friend. Trevor is her college ex-boyfriend. The guy she dated for 4 years. The one she'd told me early in our relationship that she almost married before things just sort of fizzled out between them. And now she's telling me he's coming to watch her marry me like it's the most normal thing in the world. I put my fork down carefully and said, "You invited your ex to our wedding?" And she smiled at me with this expression that was equal parts innocent and slightly condescending. Like I was being adorable but also kind of dumb for questioning it. And she said, "Yeah, we're still friends. It would actually be kind of weird not to invite him considering how close we were." I tried to keep my voice level when I said, "Jess, that's pretty unusual." But her whole demeanor shifted in an instant. Her face hardening in that way it does when she thinks I'm being unreasonable. And she hit me with, "If you loved me, you'd understand. This is about maturity. About all of us being adults who can handle complex relationships without getting weird about the past." I asked her, "Adults? You want your ex-boyfriend sitting there watching you marry me?" And she actually rolled her eyes and said, "God, you're being so insecure right now. Trevor's happily married. His wife just can't make it because she's visiting family overseas. But he'll be there and it's really not a big deal unless you make it one." Something about the way she said his wife can't make it felt off to me. Too smooth. Too rehearsed. Like she'd practiced that line. So I asked her casually, "What's his wife's name?" And I watched Jessica blink twice before answering. Rebecca. Why does that matter?" I shrugged and said, "Just curious. You've met her, right?" And she got immediately defensive with, "Of course I've met her. Several times actually."
Which only made my suspicion grow stronger.
I decided to play it cool. So I smiled and told her, "You're right. I'm being silly. If Trevor's important to you then I understand." And the relief on her face was instant. She actually leaned over and kissed my cheek and said, "See, this is why I love you. You get it." That night after she went to bed, I did what probably half of you would have done in my position and started digging around on social media. Found Trevor's profile pretty easily since Jessica had mentioned him enough times over the years that I knew his last name. And right there on his page was his wife's name. Monica. Not Rebecca. And according to her very public profile she wasn't overseas visiting family. She was a dental hygienist working at a practice literally 20 minutes from our wedding venue. I spent the entire weekend going deeper, trying to figure out what exactly was going on. And that's when I discovered Jessica had left her iPad at my apartment and it was still logged into her messages. And look, I know that's a privacy violation and under normal circumstances I'd never snoop. But when your fiancé invites her ex to your wedding and lies about his wife's whereabouts, you investigate. The messages between Jessica and Trevor went back months. Hundreds of texts that were way too friendly. Full of "remember when we did this and those were the best days," and him writing things like "shame it didn't work out between us," and her responding with "timing is everything." Which could be innocent if you're generous. But the tone, the frequency, the intimacy of it all painted a picture I really didn't want to see. Monday morning I made a decision that would change everything. I found Monica on social media and sent her a direct message from my actual account. No fake profiles or anonymous tips. Just straightforward honesty. "Hi Monica. You don't know me but I'm marrying Jessica next month. She's invited your husband Trevor to our wedding and told me you couldn't attend because you're overseas. But I can see from your profile you're local. I wanted to extend a personal invitation. Would love to have you there as my guest at Riverside Manor on the 15th. I got a response within an hour and it was exactly what I expected. "Overseas? That's interesting since I'm sitting in my office right now. Trevor told me he had a work conference that weekend. Thank you for reaching out. I'll definitely be attending." The week that followed was absolutely surreal because Jessica kept planning the wedding like nothing was wrong. Going over seating charts and final vendor confirmations. And she casually mentioned she was putting Trevor at table 3 with my college friends. So I asked her why table 3 specifically and she said, "Well, he won't know anyone else. It would be awkward to sit him with strangers." And I suggested maybe he could sit with her cousins at table 7 instead. But she frowned and said, "No. That's too far from. I mean, table 3 is just better." And she'd almost said it. Almost admitted she wanted him close to the head table where we'd be sitting. Meanwhile, Monica and I had been exchanging messages and she told me Trevor had been acting strange for months. Working late constantly. Suddenly protective of his phone. Randomly deciding to get in shape and join a gym. All the classic signs that something was off. And she'd suspected he might be cheating but didn't have any proof until I reached out. I told her about the messages I'd seen. Not every detail because that felt wrong somehow. But enough for her to understand what was happening. And she was furious. Not at me but at them. She wrote back, "That manipulative witch. And my pathetic husband. They deserve each other." We came up with a plan together. Monica would attend the rehearsal dinner as my +1. Maximum impact but minimal scene at the actual wedding if there even was a wedding after this. And 3 days before the dinner Jessica was going over the guest list and mentioned, "So it's just family and the wedding party, right?" And I confirmed that was correct. And she said, "And Trevor?" I invited him to the rehearsal dinner too. And I almost laughed out loud but managed to just ask why. And she explained, "He's traveling from out of state," which was a complete lie since he lived an hour away, so I thought it would be nice. And I told her that was very thoughtful of her. Laying the sarcasm on thick but she completely missed it. The day of the rehearsal dinner I told Jessica I needed to pick up a friend who was having car trouble. The dinner was in 2 hours and I'd be quick but they were stranded and really needed help. She should just head over and I'd meet her there. And she was annoyed but agreed. I picked up Monica and she looked absolutely incredible. Elegant black dress. Perfect makeup. Hair done professionally. She was dressed for war and when I asked if she was ready for this she said, 3 years of marriage and he's been sneaking around with his ex. Oh, I'm ready. We arrived at the restaurant about 40 minutes after everyone else. I walked in first with Monica a few steps behind me. The private dining room had around 30 people. Both our families. The wedding party. And sitting right next to Jessica at the main table was Trevor. Looking comfortable and happy like he belonged there. Jessica stood up when she saw me. Smiling. "There you are." We were getting worried. But her smile died the instant Monica walked through the door behind me. The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. And Trevor's face went white. Like genuinely white. Like every drop of blood had drained straight out of his head. Monica walked right up to him and said sweetly, "Hi honey. Surprise. My trip got cancelled." And Jessica's mouth was opening and closing but no sound was coming out. She finally managed. "Monica, I thought you were overseas." And Monica replied, "Yeah. That's what Trevor told me about his work conference this weekend too." Imagine my surprise when Drew reached out to personally invite me. I stepped forward and announced to the room, "Everyone, this is Monica, Trevor's wife. She'll be joining us tonight as my guest since Jessica was so insistent on including Trevor in our wedding celebrations." And my mom, bless her, immediately understood something major was happening and said warmly, "Monica, how lovely to meet you. Come sit by me." The rehearsal dinner turned into something absolutely nuclear. Monica sat between my mom and my sister directly across from Trevor and Jessica. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. And Jessica kept trying to act like everything was normal but her voice was shaking when she attempted small talk. "So Monica, how long have you and Trevor been married?" And Monica took a slow sip of her wine before answering. 3 years. Though apparently I should ask you how long you've been texting my husband." The sound of silverware clinking stopped. Someone coughed awkwardly. Trevor looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. And Jessica stammered, "We're just friends." But Monica pulled out her phone and said, "Friends don't text at midnight. Friends don't send shirtless gym selfies. Should I read some of these out loud?" Trevor finally found his voice and said, "Monica, please, not here." And she laughed. Actually laughed. And said, "Not here? Where then?" "At your fake work conference. Or maybe during one of your client dinners that Jessica somehow always knew about?" My groomsman Kyle whispered, "Holy hell," loud enough that several people heard. And Jessica turned to me with tears forming in her eyes. "Drew, this is a misunderstanding." And I asked her calmly, "Is it though? Is that why you lied about Monica being overseas? Why you put Trevor at table 3 close to our table? Why you invited him to the rehearsal dinner?" She actually said, "You set me up." And I replied, "No Jess, you set yourself up. I just invited his wife to the party you planned." Jessica's dad stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly across the floor. "What the hell is going on here?" And Monica answered him directly, "Your daughter's been having an emotional affair with my husband. Maybe physical too, I don't know yet. But she invited him to her wedding while explicitly making sure I wouldn't be here." Jessica screamed, "That's not true." And I pulled out my phone and asked, "Really? Should I show everyone the messages? The ones where Trevor says can't wait to see you in your dress and you respond it's bad luck for the groom to see it but not for you?" Jessica's mom gasped. Her dad's face turned purple. Trevor stood up and said, "We're leaving." But Monica laughed and said, "We? No honey. You can leave. I'm enjoying my dinner." And she turned to my mom and added, "This salmon is excellent." My mom, absolute legend that she is, raised her glass and said, "To honesty in relationships." And half the room drank to that while the other half sat in stunned silence. After Trevor slunk out like the coward he was, Jessica went into full meltdown mode. Not sad crying but angry entitled rage. "How dare you humiliate me like this?" And I shot back, "How dare I? You invited your ex to our wedding." And she said, "It wasn't like that. We're just friends who happen to have history." And Monica laughed bitterly and said, "History that was actively repeating itself." Jessica's dad looked at his daughter and asked in this broken voice, "Jessica, is this true? Have you been inappropriate with this man?" And she tried to deflect. "Dad, Drew is blowing this out of proportion. He violated my privacy." But I interrupted. "Went through your messages because you lied about his wife. You said her name was Rebecca." And her brother Jake, who'd been silent this whole time, shook his head and said, "Jess, what the hell?" That's when Jessica's mask finally slipped completely and she said, "You know what? Fine. Yes, Trevor and I have been talking. Yes, I wanted him at the wedding. He was the one who got away okay. I needed to see if I was making the right choice." The room erupted. Her mom started crying. Her dad stood up so fast his chair fell over and he roared, "At your wedding? You were going to decide at your wedding?" And I actually laughed because it was so absurd. I pulled an envelope from my jacket and said, "Well, that makes this easier. Consider this my wedding gift." And inside was the invoice for all the deposits I'd paid. Venue, catering, flowers, band, $18,000 total. Jessica stared at it confused. "What's this?" And I explained. "Your dad can explain since he insisted on doing things traditionally where the bride's family plans the wedding but I pay for it. Well, the wedding's off. These are all non-refundable deposits in my name. If you want to use them for your next wedding, maybe to Trevor after his divorce, your family can reimburse me." Her dad's face went from purple to white in about 2 seconds. "You paid all the deposits? Every penny?" And I nodded. Jessica wanted the expensive packages. "I have the receipts." Monica stood up and added, "Speaking of receipts, Trevor, expect to hear from my divorce attorney Monday. I'll be taking half of everything including your precious boat." Then she turned to Jessica and said, "You can have him when I'm done. Good luck with a cheater who lives with his mother after I take the house." Jessica started ugly crying. Not pretty tears but full snotty sobbing. "Drew, please. We can work this out. I choose you." And I said, "You choose me? How generous. After you got caught you choose me." Her sister Emma, who'd been quiet through all of this, finally spoke up. "Jess, you're a complete idiot. You had a good man and you threw it away for what? Some guy who cheats on his wife?" And their mom tried to scold her. But Emma cut her off. "No, Mom. I'm tired of everyone babying her. She's almost 30 and acting like a teenager." The dinner ended with Jessica's family arguing amongst themselves. Monica exchanging numbers with my sister because they'd somehow hit it off during this disaster. And me walking out feeling lighter than I had in months. I got a text from Jessica an hour later that just said, "You ruined my life." And I responded, "No. You ruined your own life. I just refused to be collateral damage." The next 3 days were absolute insanity. Jessica tried everything. First came the love bombing. She showed up at my apartment with flowers, which was ironic. Wearing the lingerie I'd bought her for Valentine's Day, which was manipulative. Crying about how sorry she was, which was too late. "Please, Drew. I'll cut Trevor off completely. I'll block him right now." And I told her, "Jess, you were using our wedding as a test run for your feelings. That's beyond repair." She insisted. "It wasn't like that. I was just confused." And I said, "Confused? You lied about his wife's name. That's not confusion, that's deception." She tried to push past me into the apartment but I blocked her. "We need to talk about this properly." And I told her, "No, we don't. Please leave before I call security." She played the sunk cost card. "You can't just throw away 3 years. And I replied, "I didn't. You did. The moment you invited him." When the love bombing didn't work, she went nuclear on social media. Posted this elaborate sob story about how I was controlling and jealous and ruined her wedding over an innocent friendship. Tagged all our mutual friends trying to control the narrative. But it was a massive mistake because Monica, who'd become my unexpected ally, commented, "Innocent friendship? Is that why you told him I was overseas while planning to seat him near your wedding table?" And then she posted screenshots. Not all of them, but enough. Trevor saying, "Remember that weekend in wine country?" and Jessica responding, "Best 48 hours ever," dated 2 months ago when she was supposedly at a work retreat. Jessica's carefully crafted victim narrative crumbled in real time. Her mom called me and said, "Drew, the family is humiliated. Couldn't you have handled this privately?" And I asked, "Linda, I tried." Jessica made it public when she invited Trevor to the wedding. And she pushed back. But to ambush her like that. And I said, "Like she ambushed me with her ex at our wedding?" At least I gave her the courtesy of doing it at the rehearsal, not the actual ceremony. There was silence on the line. Then she brought up money. The deposits are non-refundable and in my name. $18,000. That's extortion. And I corrected her. No. That's consequences. If Jessica wants to explain to the 150 guests why the wedding is off, that's her choice. Next came what I call the flying monkeys. Jessica's friends started texting and calling with various versions of the same narrative. She made a mistake but loves you. Monica is probably lying about some of it. All couples have issues. The wedding is in 3 weeks. Think of the guests. And to each one I sent the same response. She invited her ex she's been emotionally cheating with to our wedding and lied about his wife. Would you marry someone who did that? Most of them stopped responding after that. 2 weeks before what would have been the wedding date, Jessica's dad called me. Drew, I need those vendor contacts. And I asked why. And he sighed heavily. Jessica wants to cancel everything formally. We'll reimburse you for the deposits. I clarified. All 18,000? And he said yes. Send me the itemized list. I did. And within 48 hours I had a check. Guess they really wanted to minimize the embarrassment. Meanwhile, Monica's divorce was proceeding at lightning speed because Trevor had been sloppy. She found credit card charges for hotels when he was supposedly working late. Dinner receipts for 2 when he claimed to be alone. And best of all, a second phone hidden in his car. The second phone had everything. Pictures, texts, even a draft email where he was planning to object at our wedding. Yeah, you read that right. He was going to object when the officiant asked if anyone had reasons we shouldn't marry. Monica sent me screenshots with a message. Thought you should see what you avoided. Trevor had written to Jessica. If you give me the signal during the ceremony, I'll stand up. We can run away together. And Jessica had responded. That's so romantic. But let me see how I feel in the moment. She was literally going to decide at the altar whether to marry me or run off with Trevor. I sent this to Jessica with one word, sociopath. And her response was a novel-length text about how I didn't understand true love. How Trevor was her soulmate. How I was too boring and safe. How she'd settled for me because I was stable. I forwarded the entire thing to her dad and got a 2-word response, Jesus Christ. The day that would have been our wedding, I went golfing with my groomsmen and had an absolute blast. That evening we went to a steakhouse. The expensive one Jessica always said was too much for no reason. And halfway through dinner Kyle showed me his phone. Dude, you need to see this. Jessica had worn her wedding dress and gone to the venue alone. Posted photos on Instagram with captions like the wedding that should have been and true love means forgiveness. But the comments were brutal. Girl, this is unhinged. Didn't you cheat on him? This is embarrassing, take this down. Therapy now. Even her own sister commented. Jess, stop. You're humiliating yourself. But the real kicker came from Monica, who wrote, same dress you were going to wear while deciding between your fiancé and my husband. Classy. By the next morning Jessica had deleted everything and made her accounts private. 3 months later, here's where everyone ended up. Jessica's living with her parents. Working the same job she had before. Posting cryptic quotes about surviving narcissistic abuse that get zero engagement because everyone knows what really happened. Trevor ghosted her completely after Monica took him to the cleaners in the divorce. He lost the house. Half his 401k. Pays alimony monthly. And lives in a studio apartment that Monica told me smells like depression and microwaved meals. Monica's thriving. Got a promotion at work. Bought out Trevor's share of the house. Started dating a doctor from her gym. And we still text occasionally, which is a weird friendship, but it works somehow. As for me, I took a 2-week trip to Europe with the money from the deposit reimbursement. Met someone at a cooking class in Florence. Wasn't looking for anything, but Anna's incredible. She laughed until she cried when I told her this whole story on our 3rd date. Jessica's dad still sends me Christmas cards. He wrote in the last one, thank you for showing us who she really was before more damage was done. And her mom unfriended me on social media but occasionally likes my photos from her craft business account. Forgot I could see that, Linda. Last week I got one final text from Jessica. I heard you're dating someone. I hope you're happy. I didn't respond, but yeah, I am happy. Happy I trusted my gut. Happy I called Monica. Happy I didn't marry someone who'd use our wedding as a relationship test drive. Moral of the story. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And when they invite their ex to your wedding, invite their spouse too. The truth has a funny way of coming out at dinner parties.